Without further ado, my name is David Plaxco. I'm a math professor at Clayton State University on the south side of Atlanta. And today I would like to talk with you all about some of the stuff that, some of my investigations in Rubik's Cubes, specifically two mathematical structures and four algorithms that I find super useful for thinking about um, how to manipulate a cube in a really specific way so that it does the thing that I want it to do. The second half of my title here is not how to solve a Rubik's cube. So there are loads of resources um, out on the internet and the ether um, that teach you step by step how to solve a Rubik's cube. This is not a talk to learn step by step how to, although I do claim that given the four algorithms and the two mathematical structures, if you put those together in the right way, you can solve the Rubik's cube. And so I'll talk more specifically about how I think that is possible later on in the talk. But this isn't just going to be a step-by-step tutorial on how to solve a Rubik's cube. Instead, is looking at a specific mathematical structures and trying to leverage those to really make sense of the Rubik's cube and really get a sense of how the pieces move relative to each other. Okay, so if you don't have your own Rubik's cube, you can purchase Rubik's cubes at all kinds of places. They have them at Amazon, on the Cubicle and the Speed Cube Shop. Those are two American-based companies that specialize in selling speed cubes, which are just fast versions of the 3x3 Rubik's Cube puzzle. They also sell all kinds of different shapes and sizes of puzzles. There's a whole universe of twisty puzzle and Rubik's type fun. And you can purchase budget cubes. So this is a Shiyi Warrior. I don't know if you can see that's out of focus there. It's spelled Qiyi. This is a budget cube. You can find these for as low as $2.50 or $3 in some like if they're on sale. Generally they're under $5. So it's an affordable version of the Rubik's cube. A lot of folks think that if it's not the Rubik's brand, then it's a knockoff and not as good a quality. When in fact speed cubes, there have been lots of modifications to the core design to where these things twist really quickly and easily, and they're super affordable. So just because it doesn't say Rubik's brand doesn't mean it's not a high quality cube. Although Rubik's has started making speed cubes as well, and they do make high quality products. So I'm not trying to knock that. I'm just trying to say that there's a lot of different really good affordable options out there. Now, if you don't have access to say your allowance hasn't come yet, or you don't have an Amazon Prime account or something like that, then you can access free virtual cubes online. And so here are 3 links that I'll show you real quickly. So Rubik's, I'll show you more from this website. Sorry, there's my... There we go. I'll show you some more from this website later. This is a really good resource for learning all kinds of Rubik's related things. So Rubik's has if you look over here, there's a section called Puzzle Simulators on the left, and this 3x3 3D simulator is really nice. You can grab and drag the layers of the cube virtually. It's not always intuitive. So say like you want to move this blue face and twist this around. It's not always intuitive where you should grab. See, if you grab it here, that moves the other layer, but if you grab it here, that moves the blue layer. So it's not always the most intuitive, but you can have it shuffle itself, and you can always hit Control or Command R, refresh the web page, and it solves itself, which I think is always super useful. If you can have a Rubik's cube, it solves itself back. That's a really useful resource. Now, Colin, before we all got started, he mentioned a 2x2 cube. There are 2x2 simulators. These are 2-dimensional though. So the scramble is kind of hard to see. You might not have a sense of what these buttons mean right now, but hopefully in a minute that'll make more sense what these buttons stand for. But you can see the effect of hitting those buttons. Instead, I very much prefer the 3D 3x3 simulator that you can actually like move this thing around. So a similar, two more similar simulators to that are Rubik's Q.be. If you just punch that into your web browser, spell Rubik's Cube, and then put a dot right before the BE. This is very similar to the last one. You just click and drag, and you can move the various layers here. And if you click outside of that, you can look at the other sides of the cube and everything. So that's that one. And then Rendell Chauffeur, I don't know if I pronounced that name correctly, but this is another very similar 3D simulator. You can click and drag. That has the reset button built in, so you don't have to refresh your web page. I think they also have 3D versions of the 2x2 and the 4x4. So if you want to see those, they're there as well. Okay. So there's some nifty resources. Let me just copy the Rubik's one and just put it in the chat so that you can click on that if you need to. If you need a 3x3 in front of you. And now, oh, there's also, let's see, I did do, oh, that's the talk that I'm in right now, goodness. I dropped this in Dropbox, so I can give you a link to this actual PowerPoint. Sorry, I should have copied this ahead of time, but, so there you go. So if you click on the Dropbox link, you can get to this PowerPoint and just click the links that are in there, and also follow along the slides as you prefer. Okay, so so first things first, I'll be communicating some moves to you on the cube, and there's some pretty straightforward notation that folks use. So first you want to choose like a layer that's the up and the front and the left and the right for you. So I like that. Yeah, okay. All right, thanks. So you'll want to pick a face to keep on the up for right now when you start to apply an algorithm, right? So like, say I pick the white face and I make that the up, and I want blue to be the front and red to be the left and orange to be the right. I like this orientation. Some folks, like this cube has all the letters drawn on it. So here's the upper layer and the front and the left and the right here. But I just kind of like, I don't know, red, white, and blue feels like patriotic or something. But I always just memorized it this way, and so that's kind of how I think about it. This is the up, front, left, and right. But the important thing is that once you pick an up and you're in the middle of your algorithm, you want to keep that face up so that you're twisting the front face toward you, so that you're twisting the appropriate layers as you perform the algorithm. All right. So up is a quarter twist clockwise of the upper layer. So you can do that 4 times and you come back around to the top. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. F is a clockwise twist of the front layer. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. L is a clockwise twist of the left layer when you're looking straight at it. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here's right. And then they say, let's see, some of the special layers are the equator, like this. That's the equator. And then there's the meridian layer. And some folks call this the hook or the slice. That's the one that goes this way. And then there's down and back. Right? So if you see any of these letters, U, F, L, R, E, M, D, B, H, then those are the layers that they're referring to. So you want to move them in that direction. All right. So so there's a really clear connection between the Rubik's Cube and mathematics, upper level mathematics, specifically with the subject of mathematics called group theory. And so here's a definition of what it means to be a group. This is like really formal and technical, like college level mathematics. So let me just talk about what this means in terms of the Rubik's Cube, right? So every group has an identity element. Each element has an inverse. The group is closed and it's associative. And let's just talk about what I mean about an element and what identity and inverse and closure and associativity mean. Okay, so so we're going to define the group as all the set of possible sequences of layer moves and composition of those moves, right? So if I want to do U and F, then it would go like that, right? Or I could undo that. I can undo F and then undo U. Now, the way that we notate those undo moves is with a little apostrophe right after the letter. So you'll see like F with an apostrophe next to it, and we just call that F prime, and that just means move F in the reverse direction. So if this is F, then that's F prime. And so if you have two moves and you do them next to each other, then you combine those and you make a new sequence of moves. So let's do E. So I'm right here on my slide, E with this circle thing. That means composition. So that means do E and then do F, right? And the result of that we just call EF, right? I did the equator and I twisted the front sideways. Now I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to undo F and undo E. And I'm going to do those in the reverse order. I'm going to do F first and then do E. And if you notice, now I'm going to do the same thing on this cube, only I'm going to do E and then F. If you notice, the cube makes two different scrambles once you do that. Oh, sorry, I think I did. All right, let's do E and F. There we go. All right, so here I did FE, and here I did EF. And the scrambles on the cube look different from each other. Like, they look kind of the same. So there's like red, green, red, and some yellow. But if you notice, this piece right here, that's a different color. Right? And then on the front, there's a whole red stripe going this way. And here the red stripe goes that way, but that's yellow. And then over here, that's a different color too. So they make two different scrambles on the cube. So it's important that when we read a sequence of moves, we read them in the correct order, right? And that we do those moves on the cube in the correct order. So if it says EF, I want to make sure to do E first and then F, because that makes a different scramble on the cube than if I did F first and then E. The fancy way of saying this is to say that this group is not commutative, right? It's order really matters here. So we'll see another example of that non-commutativity here in a second, right? So so another sequence of moves, DRU, that's the down layer, the right layer, and the upper layer. So I can do those three in a row. And then if I want to undo that, I undo those backwards. So undo the upper layer, undo the right layer, and then undo the down layer. And now I can combine EF and DRU together, right? So I'll do E, F, and then I'll do D, R, U, and that scrambles the cube just that way. All right, so I'm going to set this aside for just a second, and so like there's a few things that are true about the cube based on this definition of what the moves are, right? So so the identity is when you do something to the cube that makes it look like you didn't do anything, right? So if I take this this white layer here and just twist it 4 times, you'll never know that I twisted that top layer, right? And so we would say that I did the identity algorithm to the cube, right? So inverses is just say that whatever you do, you can always undo it, and that's always true with the cube. As long as I think about it like Goldilocks, right? Or Hansel and Gretel, right? So like if you keep track of the moves that you do, you can always undo those in reverse order and get back to the solved cube, right? So you might have found a Rubik's Cube when you were a kid and said like, oh, this is so scrambled, like it's impossible to solve. Well, that's not the case, because someone just did scrambles to get it to that state, right? So it shouldn't be impossible to solve unless someone took the stickers off of it and moved them around. Like you might notice that my cubes don't have stickers because I don't want people peeling my stickers off, right? Closure just means that if you do 2 scrambles, if you do 2 algorithms on the cube, you'll get another algorithm, which is always true. And associativity just means if you do 2 things now and then a 3rd thing later, that's the same as doing the first thing now and then the last 2 things later. Okay, so now we should, when we see this slide with the layers of the moves and the names, we should be able to make some sense of those and use those to read off algorithms kind of like sheet music or something like that. All right, so what makes the Rubik's Cube so hard is that it has a whole lot of different positions. There's this many scrambles on the Rubik's Cube. That's a whole lot of scrambles. Let me pull up the annotate. That's a whole lot of scrambles. And so it's a big space to get lost in. And so it's really hard to, if you had this many toothpicks and you had to pick the one blue toothpick, it would be really hard to find that one blue toothpick, right? But the goal here is to find a way to strategically get closer and closer back to that position that we want to get to. All right. So when I alluded to this a second ago, but we're going to practice it now, right? So if we want to find the inverse of a composition of moves of an algorithm, we want to think about it like socks and shoes. So this says that the inverse of A and B is B inverse A inverse, or B prime A prime. And so let's see what that looks like played out. All right, so in the morning when you get up, you put on your socks, and then you put on your shoes. And when it's time to go home, and you come home and you're taking off your shoes and your socks, you take off your shoes first, and then you take off your socks. You don't take off your socks before you take off your shoes, right? So this just says, like, if you want to undo the thing that you did socks and then shoes. When you undo it, you undo the shoes first. Undo the shoes first, and then undo the socks next. All right, so let's practice that. So this is an algorithm that I'm going to use later. It's called Philippe, and it says the sequence of the starting sequence of moves. All right, let me get my cube oriented. So here's front, up, and left, and it says to do L prime, which means turn this one this way, and then F. U prime is to turn that way, and now do L and F prime. And so I just did this sequence of moves, L prime, F, U prime, L, F prime. Now if I wanted to undo that sequence of moves, that would undo Philippe. So what sequence of moves would we need to do to undo Philippe here? Take a minute, think for yourself. Philippe. Yeah, so Olivia says Philippe, so that's Philippe backwards, right? So Philippe is just the name of this, right? That's funny. So the moves that make up Philippe are L prime, F, U prime, L, and F prime. So instead of doing it to the name Philippe, let's do it to the algorithm that stands for Philippe. All right, so I want to undo F prime. How do you undo? What's the opposite of F prime? I might have gone a bit fast here. Did I lose my camera? Oh, great.
Yes.
My apologies. So so the idea here is we want to undo this sequence of moves then what we need to do is go this sequence in reverse, but undo each little bit along the way. So instead of doing F prime first, I'm going to undo F prime, which is the move F. That's the opposite of F prime. And then I'm going to do the opposite of L, that's L prime. And then the opposite of U prime is U. The opposite of F is F prime. And then the opposite of L prime is L. So that's going to be Philippe prime. That's the inverse of Philippe. So a little fluffle. And let's see that happen on the cube, right? So let's see, this is my original up, I think, yeah. So I'm going to do F, that's this move, L prime, oh dear.
I think you did it to the other cube.
Oh, I did. You're right. I did. Thank you. Good call. I was like, this isn't going to undo it. All right, so let's see. That was up front. Okay. So let's undo it here. So F, L prime, U, F prime, and L undoes Philippe on this cube. So it gets it back to the solved state. All right, so that's how we can undo a sequence of moves in a row using abstract algebra. And so there's our inverse. So let's look at another one. This is called the dots algorithm. And it goes equator, meridian, undo the equator, undo the meridian. All right, so let me just show you in real time. So I'll do equator. Oh, let's get focused. There we go. All right, so equator, meridian, undo the equator, and undo the meridian. So what that does is that it permutes the three center pieces around the cube right here, and also permutes the three on the back. So if I wanted to undo that sequence of moves, E, M, E prime, M prime, what sequence of moves would I need to do to the cube in order to get it back to the original solved state? All right, so we started with E, M, and then ended with E prime, M prime. So what's the first thing I'm going to undo? Nice. Yeah, good job, Olivia. So yeah, so the last thing I did was M prime. So the first thing we're going to undo is that. And so that's M. And then E, we'll undo that last E prime. And then M prime, we'll lift that back up. And E prime, will solve it right back. So good job. So yeah, we made our own little meme here today. That's the joke that I use after we find that inverse. All right. So so here's a few properties of Rubik's Cubes that, of all Rubik's Cube algorithms that should be helpful, right? So you can always do socks and shoes to undo an algorithm. And that's the general way to find any algorithm's inverses, just like with Philippe and with the dots algorithm just now, the mean. But it's also true that if you repeat an algorithm enough times, it will eventually undo itself. So this is called the order of the algorithm. And we can see this, for example, with the dots algorithm. So I'm going to play this video to show you that you can, if you repeat the dots algorithm, there's 2, and then that's a third time, it actually solves the cube back to itself. So we would say that the order of that algorithm is 3. Okay, so let's talk about a big picture goal for today, right? I'm not just trying to tell you a sequence of moves to help you solve the cube, but instead, I want to discuss algorithms that are sufficient to later solve the cube on your own if you combine the elements together in the right way. So there's 2 algebraic structures, commutators and conjugates. I'll talk about those first, And then actually I'll introduce one of the algorithms in between, just to kind of give you a sense of what the commutator is all about. But then we'll talk about the four algorithms and use the conjugates and commutators together with the four algorithms to really have precise control over the cube. All right. So when you come on a scrambled cube like this and you find a scrambled cube, it's really hard to see at first like what you might want to do with it in order to solve it back. And so if you can start to pay attention to what things you want to do, the goal here is to give you tools to do have specific control over those pieces as you start to decide what you want to do. All right. So on a cube, you can't just switch 2 or 3 pieces around because it'll mess up the rest of the cube. Instead, what you want to do is focus on the pieces and distinguish that from the positions that the pieces are in, right? So, so say we want to permute the numbers 1, 2, and 3 to look like 3, 2, 1, or I'm sorry, 3, 1, 2 rather. Then it's helpful to say, okay, well, I noticed that the 2 and the 3 come in the middle and at the far right side, and if I switch those 2 positions, then that puts 3 in front of the 2 and 2 behind the 3. And then I can shift all the pieces over 1 and undo that switch. So if I undo that switch position, it puts the 3 in front of the 1. And now I can slide them all back. And that results in the desired permutation of those 3 numbers that I wanted. Right? So this is the structure here is a switch, slide, switch, undo the switch, undo the slide. And the intersections of this switch and slide help dictate what things get permuted. So, so with the commutator A, B, A prime, B prime, this is the commutator structure. A prime and B prime are going to undo what A and B did respectively, but some things are affected by both A and B, and those things that are affected by both are the things that are going to end up not being undone. So it's helpful to focus on which pieces in a given algorithm affects, and look for those pieces in the intersection of the 2 parts of our algorithm. And it's also helpful to be able to find the inverse of this AB, A prime, B prime. So just like before with ME, M prime, E prime, if we want to undo this, we would undo it in reverse. So are you thinking in your head what the inverse of AB, A prime, B prime looks like? Oh, sorry. Olivia's meme should be a good hint here. Go from ab to baba. And here the BA and B prime, B prime. So you just switch the first 2 things in your commutator and finish out the rest of the commutator structure, and that will help you build the inverse of a commutator. All right, so some commutators actually have a pretty complex structure where the B part, or this second part, is itself a sub-algorithm, or the A part could be a sub-algorithm. And by sub-algorithm, I just mean a sequence of moves that we're going to treat kind of like one thing. So for example, let's see what happens when I perform E, F prime, UU, F, E prime, F prime, UU, F, and then the inverse of that last thing, right? So you should be able to see the general commutator structure here. So here's the first thing. So that's kind of like our A. F prime, UU, F is like our B. And then this E prime undoes that first part. So that's the A prime. And then we're going to do the inverse of that second part. That's B prime. All right, so there's our commutator structure. And if we want to do the inverse of that sub-algorithm, it's the socks and shoes approach. You just read it backwards and undo each thing. So you do F prime, and then you would do U prime, F. But it turns out that 2 U's and U prime both next to each other are the same thing. It's a half twist on the upper layer. So this element is actually its own inverse, which means it has order 2. And let's just see that actually play out. So if you click on this in the PowerPoint presentation, if you click on that link, you can see the first edge perm algorithm. All right, so E is the A part. So that's the first part of our commutator. And then the sub-algorithm is F prime UUF. So F prime is going to lift this red and blue edge up to the upper layer. UU is going to do a half twist on that upper layer. And then F is going to drop the green and white layer back down. All right, so let's see that in slow motion again. So I did an E. All that did was slide all that middle layer around. And then we're going to lift this edge right here up to the top, do a half turn, and drop it back down. So lift it up, do a half turn, and drop that front layer back down. And that puts a different edge piece right there in that middle spot. And now if we undo the equator slice, it brings that white and green edge here. And so I'll undo this, the sub-algorithm, lift, half turn, and drop, lift, half turn, and drop. And that fixes the parts that were scrambled except for the pieces that were in the intersection. So that's those three edge pieces. So then the result of this algorithm is to permute these three edge pieces with each other so that the red and blue piece edge right here goes to the orange and blue spot right there. See, it's red and blue now. Orange and blue came back here into the white and green spot, and the white and green edge came down here. So that permutes those three edges with each other. All right, and we can compare this with another algorithm. So it's this same structure. It's E sub-algorithm, E prime, and then undo that sub-algorithm. Only this sub-algorithm looks a little different. And let's see what that one looks like. So again, we can't see the sub-algorithm structure with the parentheses, but it's right here. So this is like our A and our A prime. And that's our B and our B prime. And so this is actually the inverse of those three moves right there. If you did this and then did that in a row, then it would solve the cube back. All right, so you see the equator just does that same slice again. And now R is going to lift this up to the top, this blue and red edge up to the top layer. Only instead of bringing it up here, it's going to bring it over here to the side. So just a heads up, that's where it's going to go. And now U is going to bring this green and white edge over here into its place. And then we drop that right face back down. And so now the equator, again, has only that green and white edge at a place. Like that's the only thing that wasn't there before. And so when we do E prime, it brings that green and white edge back over here. And now I'm just going to undo that sub-algorithm to fix the rest of the cube back. All right, except for those three edges. So this also permuted those three edges. And again, the red and blue edge came straight over here, straight across to the orange and blue edge. The orange and blue edge went to green and white, and the green and white edge came down here to red and blue. But if you notice, there's a difference between these two resulting permutations. So in this one, the green and white edge has the white facing on the blue face and the green sticker on the red face, whereas the second edge perm has that flipped over. And the same thing's true for orange and blue. The orange is on top in this first algorithm, and in the second algorithm, the blue's on top. So it looks like it's moving the same three pieces, but it's actually doing it in a slightly different way. And this is a shorter algorithm. That's a longer algorithm. So there's some advantages if you're trying to, say, if you're Felix Zemdegs and you're trying to go faster, you might want to use one alg over another. But orientation also matters. So if you want the green and white edge to have the white sticker on front, then you would want to use this edge perm instead of edge perm number 1 instead of edge perm number 2. Okay, so that's the commutator structure generally, and how it's used to do one edge permutation. So now I'm going to let's see. Let's clear the drawings, and then now I'm going to show you a different mathematical structure. I mentioned both two mathematical structures. So the first one is commutators. The second mathematical structure is conjugates. So we see that the value of the commutator structure, it can specifically permute pieces. We'll see later that it can also reorient pieces. But the conjugate of a structure is AB. The structure of a conjugate is AB A inverse, right? So it looks like the first three terms of a commutator. And the way I like to think of it is that the commutators are going to do the work. They're going to actually permute pieces for you, but the conjugates will help you structure the broader algorithm so that you're doing the work on really specific pieces of the cube. So, so let's see. The conjugate is going to be, like, the first step of the conjugate is going to be that you align the pieces you want to permute, or you reorient them the way you want. Then you apply the algorithm to carry out that permutation, and then you undo that initial step to fix the cube back, right? So the structure we can see there is A, B, A inverse. And so here's the idea applied to that 1, 2, 3 permutation from before. So before we started with 1, 2, and 3 all in a straight row, but if they were kind of scattered around the page, the first thing we would want to do is move them into that straight line, then do the permutation. So switch, slide, undo the switch, undo the slide, and that permutes them. And now we want to undo that original move that moved 3 up into this last spot and 1 up into this spot. And so we can see that those 3 pieces have permuted with each other, but are now back in their original homes. All right, so let's see this happen with an actual cube using the algorithm, the edge perm algorithm. Let's use the edge perm number 1. And let's actually see this play out so that we're not just perming the 3 edge pieces right here, but we can choose which edge pieces we want to perm, right? So just for practice, I'm going to do that algorithm. So first you slide the equator, then you lift, half twist, and drop, and slide the equator back, lift, half twist, and drop. And that's our edge perm right there. You can see that those are the 3 pieces that permuted with each other. Now I'll undo that by doing it's kind of like the mean thing. You lift, half turn, and drop, then do the equator, lift, half turn, and drop, and then undo the equator, and that undoes that algorithm. Okay, so now let's apply a conjugate structure to it. I'm going to, instead of leaving it solved, I'm going to turn and put this orange and blue edge right here on the back. And then I'm going to lift this green and white edge up here onto the front right, okay? So if I apply that same algorithm, that edge perm algorithm from before, it should take this blue and red one and put it in here, take this one and put it back here, and then take this one and put it over here. Okay, so that's what it just did. It did this one over here. This was green and white. It's now back here, and this was orange and blue, and that's now back here. I just realized that's the same 3 colors that I had in my on the web version, right? And now I undo that orienting step, that step that moved these pieces into place. Remember, the last thing I did was to put this one up here, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to bring it back down. And the first thing I did on that setup was to bring this piece up here, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to push that back down. We see the cube is solved back, and now instead I've permuted these 3 pieces of the cube instead of just these 2 on the front and this one in the back, right? So you can do setup moves to put pieces into the positions that you know the commutator are going to permute, and then later undo that setup in order to do them back so that you can now permute any 3 edge pieces that you want at all, as long as you remember your setup moves, right? You have to remember the order and the sequence in which you do those setup moves. Now if I undo that permutation, I'll lift, half turn, drop, slide the equator, lift, half turn and drop and slide it back. If I undo those setup moves in the right order, it solves the cube back. Okay, so let's look at some more commutators to give us just a glimpse into how powerful this structure actually is on controlling the pieces of the cube. So remember Philippe from before? We found the inverse of Philippe that was FL prime U F prime L. And if we build a commutator with Philippe and the equator slice, it looks like this. And of course, this is a sequence with the prime on the outside, so that's not, it should look like, oh no, goodness, it is the correct inverse. I just left that apostrophe in there on accident. That's a mistake. My bad. But it's right here. And again, let me put these parentheses in here so we can see there's the boundaries of Philippe here. Here's the slice, so that's our B move. Here's B, here's Philippe inverse, and there's B prime there. Okay. So if I do Philippe, that's L prime, F, U prime, L, F. And we notice that the effect that Philippe has is it messes up this L shape up here on the top. It messes up an L shape down here, but it takes this one red-blue edge and flips it upside down. That's why I named it Philippe. And otherwise, the rest of the equator slice, that equator layer, is intact. So if I do E prime, that'll bring this orange and blue edge into this place. And that's the only thing that I've changed on the equator layer so far. So now undoing Philippe is going to fix this L shape up here and this L shape down here, and it's going to turn this piece in the middle upside down. So now you see that the rest of the cube is solved, but that equator layer is messed up. So we fixed the E prime that we did before by doing E, and it brings the centers back into place. And it brings the edges back into place, except now red and blue and orange and blue have been flipped upside down. So this is an edge reorienting algorithm that leverages Philippe in the commutator structure. So similarly, we could do a setup move before this reorienting algorithm to put a different edge into this slot, and it would reorient some other edge somewhere around the cube, and then we would just undo that orienting move. So let's see that real quick. So I'm gonna keep the red blue as the first edge that we're gonna flip. But can someone give me two other colors on the cube that are adjacent? So let's see. Our options are orange yellow, orange blue, orange green, orange white, green and white, green and yellow, red and green, red and white. Red and yellow. Any takers? Orange and blue. Oh, that's straight across. All right, we can flip those. All right, so, well, do you want to do orange, blue, and one other than orange and one other than blue and red? So let's do orange and blue and let's see. I like red and yellow. What do you say? Let's do orange and blue and red and yellow. All right, so I'm going to get red and yellow up here, and then straight across from the orange and blue. Now I do Philippe. So this piece flipped upside down, and I'm going to bring red and yellow across, undo Philippe, and then push that back. All right, so that flipped this guy. I flip this one upside down, and now we need to reset the setup move. I think that was a half twist here, and then a quarter twist there. And now we've just controlled those two edges and flipped those upside down. The rest of the cube is back to solved. All right, so that's how to reorient an edge. Now let's see. Okay, we're gonna have to speed through this one a little bit for the sake of time, I think. So usually I have folks kind of examine the order of this one commutator, L, F, L prime, F prime. Or sorry, L prime, F, L, F prime. So if we just watch the sequence of it, so L, F, L prime, L prime, F, L, F prime does that. And now I'll do it again. Let's try to get this as big as possible. There we go. So that's 2 cycles of the algorithm. It does this like kind of funky L-shaped thing down here. It twists these 3 edges, it permutes those around, but it twists this corner and doesn't do anything else to the upper layer. So let's do that again. I did it twice. It did the same thing. It twisted this again. And then one more time. It brings the cube all the way back around. So if I do this one time, I notice that this corner is twisted, and that's the only thing that's affected on the upper layer. So if I push a different corner into place there, and I undo that algorithm, it'll twist this in the reverse direction. And now I'll just push this back into place. And so the result of that is that you twist 2 corners on the cube and everything else remains solved. All right, so that's this algorithm here. You do 2 copies of it, and then you twist the U, and then you undo those 2 copies of the sub-algorithm, and then you untwist the U. So there's 2 copies of the algorithm, and then that undoes the 2 copies. That's the first part. Then U pushes a different corner into place, and now you undo the first part. Oh, went one too far. And then U prime will twist it back. That's that same effect. All right, and then finally we can build a commutator with L, and then this in and of itself is a commutator, R prime, U prime, RU. So this is a mega commutator. And here's the final algorithm structure once you write out the inverse of this sub-algorithm. And we can see that play out. So here's L, and then the sub-algorithm is going to be R prime, so it's going to bring R down, U prime, and then RU. There's the sub-algorithm, and now we undo the L, and that brought this white, blue, and orange corner into that slot, and otherwise everything else on L is the same. So that's the only piece that's in the intersection of the L and the sub-algorithm. So that's gonna be a change. And then now that we undo the sub-algorithm, we can see what effect that has. All right, so this used to be red, white, and blue. Now it's white, red, and green. And there's the red, white, and blue corner. There's the orange, blue, and white corner. So that permutes corners for us. And now the white sticker is not on the top anymore for these two pieces. So we can use the last algorithm if we wanted to twist those to where the white piece is on top. I can show you what that looks like. All right, so I'll do the corner permuting algorithm. So that's going to take these three corners and permute them with each other. Sorry, I'm doing it a little fast for the sake of time, but that's the same one that we just watched. And here the yellow sticker is facing the front, and here it's facing the back. So I can do the corner reorienting algorithm. That's the one that did a twist here, then you use the upper layer, and then you undo that and undo the upper layer. And now you've got the yellow face is yellow again, but you've permuted these three corners so that they no longer match the faces that they're touching. Okay, so with all of these algorithms in hand and these two structures, you should be able to manipulate any pieces of the cube that you want to, as you prefer. Although it does take a lot of practice. I've practiced this for a long time. So yeah, that's the end of my talk. That's what I got for you today. So let me know if you have any questions. I can stick around for several minutes. Evans, I think, gave me the green light to go long on questions if you need to. Just so everyone has the link to this talk, to the slides, you can access the PowerPoint here in my Dropbox. And so that should give you access to all the links. There's also some a few slides after the thank you slide that show the moves, the algorithms. And I'll start my video back up with my face now. So it looks like Laura took off. She mentioned my cube art in the chat though. If yes, Olivia. Oh, that's interesting, Column. Yes, Olivia, I've solved several cubes, and let's see. I guess the 3x3 is the famous one, right? But I've also solved, like, this is a funny shaped one here. That's one that I've been doing some art with. I put checkerboards on these. Here's a 9x9. And I like to put patterns on these a lot too. So this is called a half solved cube because half of it looks solved, but the other half is actually a pattern. So Column, I think you can have you can program it to change the colors on the Rubiks. Oh yeah, that's a good version of that. So you probably just turned your cube a quarter turn.
I was trying to be, when you were asking us to try a thing, I was like, I'm not moving my hands. I don't want to, because if I twist the cube a bit, I won't know how to twist it back to the original orientation. So I was being super careful, or so I thought, but I clearly messed up anyway.
Well, the 4 dots one actually has a pretty easy algorithm as well. It's just the commutator, but instead of one meridian move, you just do 2 of them.
Each time?
No, the equator you do 1 of, and then it's MM instead of just 1 meridian. So. And
then MM again when you're undoing it.
Mm-hmm.
That'll permute 4. Interesting. Yeah, so I don't know what I did, but anyway, after much messing around, I finally just toward the end restored it. I mean, if you make a mistake enough times, the same mistake,
yes.
You will. That's the beauty of it. But
yeah.
You have to be so consistent.
Yeah. And so, so for a long time, I had to try to when I felt myself messing up, I had to think back in my hands to the point where I messed up and try to back up to that. But yeah, if you know the move that you did, just keep doing it. Just keep doing it over. What was it John Prine said? If you if you make the same mistake enough, then people start calling that your style. Hi, Olivia. Do you have any questions? So you asked if I ever solved the cube. I have solved the cube. Yes. Bunches and bunches of times. Do you want to see it? Do you want to see it scrambled and solved? Yeah? Okay. I can't solve any cube. There's some that are really tough.